Hi, guys. Thanks for joining us on Winter Tai Chi Chats. And before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit that subscribe button if you aren't subscribed already. Today's guest is the headmaster of Dean Wade Dojo, located in Reading, England. He has a very diverse background in the martial arts, having studied Shorinji Kempo, Shotokan Karate, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Shaolin, and Wing Chun Kung Fu, which he shares through his vast curriculum. He's a best-selling author published by YMAA Productions, or Publications rather, and with his entitled book, Wing Chun In-Depth, Skills for Combat, Strategies for Life. He clearly aims to produce model global citizens for this ever-progressing modern world. Please welcome Munawar Ali Karim. How are you doing, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your show. It's a pleasure to be here.
Hey, thank you very much for the time that you've taken to speak with me today, sir. So, without further ado, let's go straight into that interview, okay? How did you start the martial arts, Munawar?
Okay, so this is, I mean, where should I begin? So, I think if I tell you I don't want to go, well, let me tell you the long story. I'll try to cut out the boring bits. So I mean, when I was very, very young, as long as I can remember, I grew up hearing stories of heroes from all kinds of traditions. So they could be Greek heroes, Chinese heroes, Indian heroes, Muslim heroes, American heroes, but heroes of all kinds. And so from the earliest memories I have memories of heroes in my life. You know, most of them are fictional heroes, but also historical heroes. And then at some point when I was very young, about 7 or 8 years old, I came across books, and I came across martial arts books. And the heroes always, in those stories that I was growing up with, always had some special skill or talent. Normally they always had some kind of martial art. You know, there might be a guy who's good at sword fighting. There might be like Zorro was, a champion at sword fighting, and all kinds of different characters, but they have some kind of unique thing. And I never made that connection in a overt way. But when I came across a book on martial arts, I realized I could add this skill set to myself. I could acquire this knowledge, and it would make me one step closer towards being a hero. So that was the passion for it. And so when I was about 11 or 12 years old, I had the chance to take a martial arts class. That was a Shotokan karate class. And I came to it having read a lot about martial arts. I was following a magazine called Combat Magazine in the UK at the time, reading lots of articles on the martial arts. And I actually had a bad opinion of karate. I thought karate was very rigid and too much, there's lots of forms and linear movements, and it's not practical in fighting and things like that. But someone persuaded me to to go and see this class. And when I went to see this class, it was karate, it was Shotokan karate. But the training that they were doing before they did the forms was something else. It was very, very special. And so I signed up straight away. My brother signed up, and that began that journey of formal study in martial arts. It turned out that the training the teacher was doing, he was a student of a great karate sensei, but he had started to study Chinese martial arts. And he was doing training which was coming from Hung Gar Kung Fu and Shao Gar Praying Mantis Kung Fu. And so he incorporated that into the Shotokan. So the Shotokan was very traditional, but the physical training we did, the conditioning, was all from the Chinese tradition. And that was the beginning of my foray into martial arts. And it's been my life since then. I've always and continuously been studying martial arts since then. So, yeah.
All right. So you started with Shotokan karate, and I would say you would say infused with a little bit of Jiaoga as well as a little bit of Honga as well, right? Yeah. So how did you come to study Shorinji Kempo and other martial arts?
Yeah, so martial arts it was clearly something I loved to do, and it was a passion for me. Also, there was this, I think as all kids, an element of being able to protect yourself against bullies and all of that kind of stuff. So there was I wanted to learn it for real life self-defense. So it wasn't just the art itself. And then there's the romanticism around martial arts and stories and, tales and movies and all of that stuff. But so by the time I got to university, I wanted to study Japanese language and go and study martial arts further in Japan. So I took up a degree in law and Japanese. So I was studying law and with the Japanese language. And that allowed me to go to Japan and continue my study of the martial arts. When I was in Japan, I came across Shorinji Kempo. And Shorinji is the Japanese translation for Shaolin Temple. So Shaolin is Shorin in Japanese. Ji means temple. And so I thought, this is great. I want to do, this is what I want to do. So I took up Shorinji Kempo whilst I was there as a student. And then when I went back there to work, I worked for the Japanese government for a few years. And I continued my practice of Shorinji Kempo and other martial arts the second time I was there. So that was an interesting experience.
I can imagine so. So while you were living in Japan, it was a study of Shorinji Kempo as well. Any other styles? Like I think I had read ninjutsu as well.
Yeah. So the second time I went to Japan. So when I was a student there, I mostly did Shorinji Kempo. The second time I went to Japan, I went there to work there, and it was a very good post. I was in the countryside. I lived on something called the Nakasendo, which is the road between Kyoto and modern day Tokyo. So the old capital, Edo, is the Tokyo, and the old capital, Kyoto. So it was the road that people took to visit the shogun. It was one of the major roads linking the old capital to the new capital. And it's full of history, martial arts history. You know, if anybody follows Miyamoto Musashi and his life, there's a famous novel about Musashi's life written by a Japanese man, Eiji Yoshikawa, I think his name is. And it has some scenes from the Nakasendo right near where I lived, actually. So that area is infused with martial arts, and especially with the ninjutsu, some shinobi traditions, some ninjutsu traditions. So I spent my time really internalizing those traditions, studying them, reading about them, exploring the areas where there were famous events associated with some ninja, so-called ninja clans and things like that. So it was quite an experience. It was a very kind of a spiritual journey when I was living in Japan, because I was so much. For example, there was no foreigners in the town I lived in, apart from myself, and so it's very much, immersed in Japan, but in an old Japan that most foreigners don't see. In fact, the town where I lived in and the nearby towns looked like sets from samurai movies, what's called Jidaigeki. They just looked like those traditional houses and those kinds of streets and all of that kind of stuff. So it's quite fascinating.
That's awesome. That's awesome, having that experience living in, well, as you said, in a place with scenes that look like video games. That's awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
So after your experience with Shorinji Kempo and ninjutsu, those two times that you went to Japan, how does Shaolin Kung Fu come into the mix after?
Yeah, so when I came back, I mean, all of this time, to be honest, right from now that I think about it, from the very beginning, when I was 11 or 12 years old and went to the Shotokan karate, I was looking for Shaolin Kung Fu. I liked the karate club because he was the conditioning and training they were doing. I recognized from my reading that this was from the Chinese tradition, and it was there were elements of it from Chinese martial arts. And then when I went to Japan, Shorinji Kempo being, by name, Shaolin Temple Fist. Shorinji Kempo, but I realized obviously that these were quite different martial arts. And when I came back to the UK, I realized that I made a mistake. I should not be looking for styles of martial arts. I should be looking for a good teacher, a really good teacher. And I was fortunate to come across a really good Shaolin teacher, Zenkei Wang, who was the 33rd generation monk from the Shaolin Temple. In London, they'd set up something called the Shaolin Temple UK, and he was one of the teachers there. And so I spent a lot of time with him teaching, learning from him, and he would come and visit me in Reading. We would train together, do personal, private classes. I would go visit him at the Shaolin Temple UK, and that was finally I was able to study Shaolin Kung Fu as I had envisaged as a child. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, since we got onto the subject of Kung Fu, now the big question is, how did you get into Wing Chun?
Right, so Wing Chun was the same thing. So my Shaolin teacher, unfortunately, decided to leave the UK and move over to Australia. He got I mean, not unfortunately for me, it was unfortunate, but for him, it was good. He had some parts in movies, and he got married and moved over to Australia with his wife. So I was left without a teacher again, and feeling like kind of like a masterless samurai. I was looking for another teacher, and I had realized by this time, as I said, that it's not really about the style, it's about the teacher. And I think if you want to study anything, more than the thing you study, find a really good teacher, find a master of what you want to study. And so I decided, let me look around, who's nearby that's really accomplished in his martial art. And I came across Sifu Lucas Castrunis, and the book, by the way, we wrote together. He asked me to write the book for him, and we collaborated on it. So I discovered Sifu Lucas. He was in my town, and he'd been here for all these years. I'd never known. So I went to visit him, and it was quite a scene going into his poon, his dojo, if you like. It was like a set from a Chinese movie. And I took up my study of Wing Chun, and that became a really fascinating journey, which really taught me a lot about the underlying principles that are important in martial arts. That was really fascinating, and then led to the production of this book, which was a work of love, really.
All right, and you've been doing Wing Chun for the better part of, say, 2 decades or so? I know.
Maybe close to that. I probably a little bit less than that, 2 decades, maybe about 14 years. 14 years, maybe.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's still an extensive amount of time in Wing Chun. That's very good. Yeah. That's very good. That's awesome. No wonder you're able to you're able to study and get all the information that you can, especially with your Sifu, collaborating to bring this book together. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome.
Yeah. So I was going to say, Mark. So Sifu Lucas. I mean, I was very much a beginner student when he asked me to write this book for him. I mean, he saw something in me. I don't know. I never mentioned that I'd written before and I could write well, or that I'm a writer or anything like that. But he obviously intuited something, and he asked me to write the book. And then we spent a long time continuing to practice, continuing to train with him for all his years. And the book took about 7 or 8 years to come to fruition. And in that time, I really became now a very, very careful observer of Sifu Lucas's teachings in Wing Chun. And it is Wing Chun from the Wang Chun Yung tradition, which is the lineage that goes to Ip Man. Ip Man's one of his top students was Wang Chun Leung, who was also a close friend and teacher of Bruce Lee. And that's the Wing Chun that Sifu Lucas inherited. So he's like a second, third generation Wang Chun Leung master.
Mm-hmm. Well, hearing that you had actually the whole process of the book was about 8 years. So when you started writing the book, it was really on the beginning of your Wing Chun path. Now, that leads me to ask this question, Munawar. Was your transition from your previous martial arts to Wing Chun kind of like a fish to water kind of situation, or not so much?
It's very much a fish out of water situation. Yeah, it's very different. It was very different experience. Coming into Wing Chun from having done Shorinji Kempo and some Shaolin Kung Fu and originally Shotokan Karate, it was quite a different approach to, if you like, the problem of martial arts, the problem that martial arts is trying to solve. Quite different, I would say. It was. I think Wing Chun is quite unique in how it deals with the domain of the subject of martial arts.
Okay, that's awesome. So I gotta pivot a little bit and ask you a bonus question, I'd say, right? Because it wasn't included in the list of questions I asked you, right? It's only because you are probably the first practitioner that I know and I'm fully aware of that practice two arts that I have to ask this question about Shorinji Kempo and Shaolin Kung Fu. As you had alluded to earlier, you had said that Shorinji literally is the Japanese translation of Shaolin Temple. Right? And knowing, right, you know me, I'm a big historian on martial arts, so I know that Doshin So, the founder of Shorinji Kempo, was also a student of the Shaolin Temple, and it was only after he came back to Japan from his studies in Shaolin that he founded the Shorinji School of Karate. So my question is this: how similar or how different are Shorinji Kempo and Shaolin Kung Fu?
Yeah, it's a great question. No one's ever asked me this question before, and I mean it's a wonderful question because I mean I actually learned to my great surprise that actually they're very different. I would say they're very different. Shorinji Kempo is not Shaolin long fist Kung Fu. There's a lot of chin na in it. There's a lot of wrist locks and joint manipulation in Shorinji Kempo. They sometimes it's called Arahat Kempo. For some reason I just recall this. So I think the Doshin So what he actually studied was a type of Chinese Kung Fu, but it wasn't necessarily Shaolin long fist Kung Fu that we see in the Shaolin Temple nowadays, or that's associated with, long fist Kung Fu in China. It certainly is not long fist Kung Fu. That's definitely the case. It's quite different. But there's lots of Shin Na in it. So it is Chinese. It definitely has a Chinese element to it in terms of the techniques and things like that. It has a flavor of karate in it a little bit, in the terms of how the structure is very rigid, and their positioning and their stances can be quite rigid in the beginning of the early stages of practice of Shorinji Kempo. But I think it will be looking at it objectively as historians perhaps. I don't think we can say that it is authentically long. I might get in trouble for saying this, and this is not disrespect to Shorinji Kempo. I love Shorinji Kempo, but I don't think it's actually long fist Shaolin Kung Fu. I think that's pretty clear. Which doesn't mean it's not effective. In fact, Shorinji Kempo, Doshin So wanted to use Shorinji Kempo to clean up the neighborhoods in Japan after the war. He found that there was lots of crime and things like that, and so it had this idea of helping protect people and reform society. So it was designed to be effective, and it is an effective martial art in terms of self-defense for sure. Yeah.
All right. Masterful answer right there, Munawar. Thank you very much, my sir.
You're welcome.
All right. That was a great answer for a pivot right there. So now, Speaking of pivoting, let's go ahead and pivot back to the real third question of the interview, sir. Right? Well, we can always go back to the second part of the second question, which we didn't ask. When it comes to Wing Chun, going back to Wing Chun, is it a practical style for fighting, you think?
I want to answer that question. Can I read to you a section from the book, a very short paragraph?
Please do.
So this is the book. I'm going to read to you it's just a little bit from the introduction, because one of the questions you'd asked me was, what is Wing Chun? And so this introduction tries to answer that question in a very simple way in just 2 paragraphs. The competent Wing Chun practitioner moves with a sophisticated understanding of body mechanics. He responds to dangerous forces with mechanical efficiency. He appears to effortlessly redirect hostile force to a position of personal advantage. He understands how to align his body and limbs correctly to produce maximum leverage and remove an incoming threat to his center line. The scientific term for this is mechanical advantage, but don't be fooled. While the Wing Chun practitioner does indeed have a deep intuitive grasp of body mechanics, his body is not in fact responding mechanically. It is responding naturally and freely. The Wing Chun adept is not a slave to his art. Although his path to mastery began with imitation, his art is now his. He owns it, and it's his guide in difficult situations. There's little margin of error in following that guide, but surprisingly, this is not an art that teaches techniques. Wing Chun is the martial art that focuses on principles, energy work, body mechanics, and efficiency of movement. And that's the thing. Now, those things efficiency of movement, body mechanics, energy, position, breathing, with a particular focus on protecting yourself, is what Wing Chun is about. Now, if you say, is Wing Chun effective for fighting? I will be a little bit ironic and say it's not effective for fighting. It's effective for stopping fights, because Wing Chun's purpose is to stop the fight. It's not to keep the fight going. So Wing Chun doesn't like to engage in blows. I'm not going to punch you and then move out the way and block and wait for your punch. We're not going to exchange blows. It's not like some types of fencing where, it's my right to attack and then I have to wait for your right to attack. And it's not like that. Wing Chun is not like, it's not exchanging blows. Wing Chun is about to stop a fight very quickly, which is what really, in fact, if we were looking at, I can't speak so much for the Chinese characters, but the Japanese character for martial is composed of a character for stop and two spears. It's the same in Chinese, actually. To stop, two spears. So the idea is to stop the fight. And Wing Chun is extremely effective in stopping the fight. And why is it extremely effective? It's extremely effective in stopping a fight because it utilizes our body mechanics as human beings. We have essentially the same bodies, the same mechanics. There's only a limited way that we can cause harm to each other, and there's certain targets on the body that are the most vulnerable. And so what Wing Chun does, it utilizes all of those elements to stop a fight very, very quickly. And so Wing Chun is not effective in fighting, it's effective in stopping a fight.
Okay. No, I definitely understand. I definitely get that. So by that logic, this is what I'm going to ask you, right? So the way how Wing Chun is depicted in the movies, thinking about it, the way how he explained it, that's not Wing Chun. Definitely not Wing Chun. Wing Chun is just there to end the confrontation, and that's it.
Yeah, because it would be a very short movie if we, it wouldn't be a good movie. It wouldn't be a long movie if we made the Wing Chun too realistic. I have to say the Ip Man movies, the latest, I'm not sure if they're latest, there's been so many iterations of these, but the Ip Man movies that came out a while back, they had
Donnie Yen one?
The Donnie Yen ones, yeah. They were, they had good choreography of Wing Chun in it. They tried to be authentic to that, but they also obviously need to show action and make it exciting. And so that obviously departs them from the true nature of the martial art. Wing Chun, Sifu Lucas, my teacher, often talks about Wing Chun being a skill and not an art. He says it's martial skill and not martial art. Now, as I said to you, as we were talking about how I got into martial arts, it was from a very kind of romantic idea of chivalry and being a hero and all that kind of stuff. So for me, I don't like that idea that it's a martial skill and it's not an art. I like the idea of being an art. But what Sifu Lucas means by that is that it doesn't have flowery moves and things like that. It actually goes straight to the purpose, which is to stop the fight.
So in terms of Japanese, in Japanese terms, I believe it's what you're talking about is Jutsu versus Budo.
That's right. Yeah, right? Exactly right. Jutsu versus Budo. So we mentioned this in the book. For Sifu Lucas, Wing Chun is more like a Jutsu, not the Do. It's not the Do.
Okay.
Yeah. But the irony. Yeah. But the irony of that, the Do is the way, right? The irony of that is, though, and in this book, actually, we look at the lives of some of the great masters of Wing Chun, tracing their lineage back. They all used Wing Chun to inform their lives and to help them in their lives. And so it becomes a kind of way. It becomes a way with a capital W. And this is one of the fascinating things for me. So one of the biggest benefits I got from Wing Chun actually is that aspect of it, is how it translates into every aspect of life. Those principles that Wing Chun has embedded within it, they very naturally translate into every aspect of life. And so in that sense, there is that aspect to it. But in terms of in combat, it very much is a skill to stop fighting, to stop a fight. In fact,
Okay, okay. So,
I'll tell you an interesting anecdote. One time when I was training with Sifu Lucas, he said to me, he mentioned this to me. He said, in Wing Chun, we want to end the fight in 1 or 2 blows, 1 or 2 points of contact. We want to end the fight. And I was thinking to myself, I can't imagine how you could end a fight that quickly. And then he said, okay, there was a couple of us. He said, okay, attack me. And sure enough, 1, 2, and we were all tangled up within our own arms and legs. And Sifu Lucas was completely safe. And so a good Wing Chun master is like that. 1, 2, or 3 moves, and they can end the fight.
awesome. That is absolutely awesome. I myself would love to meet Sifu Lucas as well. He sounds absolutely prophetic. He definitely does.
He's a wonderful guy.
Right. So now, with all your experiences with your previous martial arts and with your experiences with Sifu Lucas in Wing Chun, I have to ask you this question, right? What, in your opinion, is the hardest part of developing Kung Fu, knowing that Kung Fu is that Cantonese term, literally meaning a skill acquired over time?
Exactly, and a skill acquired over time through hard work. So that's what the term means, Kung Fu, you're right. Yeah, it means a skill acquired through, over time, through regular discipline, practice, hard work. Kung Fu is literally hard work. And it's interesting that the term never wasn't used solely for martial arts until modern times. You could be a Kung Fu practitioner who's a master of tea, or master of painting, or building a house, or you could be in a modern context, you could be a Kung Fu master as an electrician, or a car mechanic, or that's what Kung Fu means. Now translated into the domain of martial arts, that is still there. That the regular, continued, disciplined, difficult practice, always challenging oneself each time, repeating the same moves, challenging oneself. So Kung Fu is going to be difficult. And I think people, and any study of martial arts is not just Kung Fu, but martial arts here, I mean, Chinese martial arts. But any martial art is going to be difficult to study if it's worth it. If it's worth studying, you're going to have to put time, effort, and energy into it, and probably it's going to cost, there's going to be expenses and going to the teacher or whatever. Specifically with Wing Chun, the difficulty is it takes a long time to see the results. Now, what I mean by that is relatively long time. If you went to a boxing class, you can see the effectiveness of what you're learning straight away. The teacher might hold up a pad and say, okay, you're going to throw a punch like this, and you're going to do a hook, whatever. And you can see that's going to be effective. If you come to a Wing Chun class and the teacher asks you to stand in this unusual stance with your knees kind of toes pointing inwards and pulling your arms back, and you're doing this thing, and you're thinking, well, how am I going to use this for? How is this effective? And you have to do this again and again and again. That's difficult. It's difficult to, especially for modern people, it's difficult to have faith in, this is the question people ask, will this really work in real life? And I think that disciplined practice of just practicing the form, Su Lim Tao, for example, which contains all of Wing Chun in it, the first form of Wing Chun contains all of Wing Chun in it. It's like they call it the dictionary form. It has like all of the elements of the entire art in it. That takes a faith and continuous practice. And it might seem a little bit boring, like, why are you doing this all of the time? But if you're consistent at it, it starts to give you a lot back, much more than you put into it. And so that's a difficult thing, I think, with Wing Chun, is the time it takes to understand what you're doing is very much practical and effective. In fact, more than you could actually imagine.
So am I correct in saying that there is no instant gratification for Wing Chun?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're correct. There might be. I mean, some people, if you like to, it depends on your school as well. There's the school that people go to. If people like to feel like they're in a movie set from a Chinese martial arts studio, that people like that. It is a movement. You are moving, and there's companionship with others, and it's great fun practicing Wing Chun. Some of the best martial arts you hear people laughing when they're practicing it. You can tell it's a good martial art when people are laughing. When I was in Japan, I actually did a tiny bit of Aikido, not much, but I actually would have liked to have spent more time studying Aikido, because I found the students were always laughing as they practiced.
They just enjoyed it so much.
They enjoyed it so much. I mean, like, somebody's flying across the room and he's laughing as he gets up, rolls around the room and gets up and he's laughing, and then he goes and does it to the other guy, But you can see that there's that shows the quality of an art, as far as I'm concerned.
That's awesome. That means they're really, truly enjoying it, man. That's great.
Really,
that's
absolutely
great. Right, so I do have to agree with that, sir. That your opinion of what's the hardest part, I'm in complete agreement with that. So, Munawar, let's go into our fourth question, sir. Right?
Yeah.
How has your martial training benefited your personal and your professional life?
Wow. So, I mean, in all kinds of ways. In fact, in all aspects of my life. So, from the physical practice, in terms of health, and the confidence it's given me, so back in the day when I was with my Shotokan teacher, and we were doing Hungar horse dances before the karate, we haven't done the session begins, and he puts you in a Hungar horse dance. We're in that horse dance, and we have to stay there for like as long as we can. And the legs start shaking, and you want to give up. The mind says, "This is crazy, stop," and people stop. But then something clicks, and you say, "No, I can go further than what the mind has a safety mechanism, but there's more to go." The mind says, "Stop here," but the body hasn't given up yet. It's the mind that's giving up. So the mind says, "Okay, relax, mind." The body will tell you when to stop, and then you start to ascend to this other level. Then you get to the point where the legs actually give way by themselves and you collapse. And then you look at the clock and it's 5 minutes. You've been in the horse dance for 5 minutes. And that experience at that age taught me that it's possible to go way beyond what we think are our limits, And it taught me the relationship between the mind, breathing. The horse dance, to do it well for that long, is a kind of meditation. You actually put yourself into your mind has to go somewhere else and kind of not worry about, and you slow down your breathing. Those things that the martial arts gives you, they're priceless, and they can apply to so many different aspects of your life. So just that one thing, that experience back when I was 11 or 12 years old, 13 years old, and going on, it was just symbolic of all the other things that martial arts has taught me. So, for example, in my main job as a head teacher, I'm a head of a school, an academic school, what you guys might call it, I think K-12 in the States, so Montessori school, junior and senior school. We have inspectors come to the school, government inspectors, and they thoroughly inspect every aspect of the work and all this kind of stuff. And it will be very stressful. It is stressful to have your work scrutinized in such detail. But the martial arts allows you to deal with that. It allows me to deal with that without it taking over my life or destroying me. I mean, there's a very sad case of a really good head of school in the town where I live, who took her own life because of the stress of what she was doing. It's very stressful, and the inspectors came. They gave her a bad inspection, and she very tragically took her own life. So because it's a very stressful job, but the martial arts allows you to be able to understand that and deal with it. When especially Wing Chun, because Wing Chun is so much about principles. But one of the principles in Wing Chun is you have a structure, which is just the structure that Wing Chun teaches you, and body mechanics. And then anything can come. You can just come, and the structure will allow you to deal with that. And so having that trust in the structure, that's what the other thing that martial arts, especially Wing Chun, can teach you. So it's affected me in so many profound ways. I mean, I can't begin to count all of them. It's affected me in a positive way, physically, mentally, and spiritually.
I can definitely see it. And looking at the manifest of your school, right? I can definitely see how martial arts has even influenced that. That's
Right, yeah, for
absolutely
sure. We teach,
yes.
we teach those ideas and that spirit of the martial arts within the school because it helps children become resilient. Gives them aspiration. It's fun as well. Everybody gets involved. Nobody needs to be excluded. It might be a child who's not that physically capable or doesn't get out a lot, but we can do things that are fun and have that person moving and developing and extending his potential in ways that you can't do with traditional sports and things like that. So,
this is true. Martial arts does offer an avenue of teaching certain things in ways that you can't do it in other disciplines.
Absolutely.
I agree with you on that one. Definitely so, definitely. And since we're speaking about your Montessori school as well as your dojo, sir, I do have to ask you, right? If you could teach the new generation of martial artists only one thing, it could be technique or it could be philosophy, either one, what would it be?
I would teach them to think critically. And that means to not just accept what people tell them about things. And I don't mean this in an arrogant way. I don't mean this as like not believing just dismissing what people tell you, but to analyze things critically, even their own ideas and assumptions. And I think for young people nowadays, especially, living in the world that is emerging right now, which is very disturbing, all these things happening in the world, and all of this misinformation, and everybody's trying to tell you a version of events or want you to believe what you have to be able to think critically. And so I think for young people especially, the ability to think critically, I think is priceless in this day and age. And if you're a martial artist, the same thing. Don't believe, think critically about what you're doing. So I'll give you an example from Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I was in a dojo yesterday sparring, and I had this is a dojo that's focused on BJJ more as a sport, not as a self-defense thing. And so they're content to just lie and wait for people. I had somebody in a kind of a headlock, and I had my legs wrapped over him in what they call a guard. And he was a good BJJ practitioner, so he just stayed there. He didn't try to. I couldn't actually choke him or anything like that. The position wasn't quite correct, and he knew that, so he stayed there. But I'm thinking, in a real life situation, you don't want to stay there because you don't know what else is coming. If he's got, maybe I just want to restrain him, and he doesn't want to be restrained. So I think whatever you're practicing, the ability in terms of your martial art, the ability to think critically becomes important. And in spirituality and in academics, that thing is becoming a lost skill. The ability to think critically.
I completely agree with you, and I could not have said that any better than you just did, Munawar. Critical thinking, not many people do it anymore.
Yeah.
Especially with the ease of looking up information. Right? Whenever you want something, instantly you can get it. Right? You look up, you want to know about something, just look on the internet, use Google or whatever search engine. Right? The ability to have somebody go and flip through pages, actually look and see what they want, and be able to throw away what it is that they found that isn't what they want.
Yeah.
All of that. That's all through critical thinking. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Sadly, as I said, it's a skill that people just don't have anymore.
And you know what? This all this access to information, like you said, you can look up things on Google, and you have to think about the source. Who's writing this piece of information? Who's put it out there? Why have they put it out there? And does it make sense when you look at other pieces of information? You should not take things at face value, especially nowadays. And that goes with martial arts as well. When I first heard about Wing Chun, just to illustrate this example, I was still young, and somebody said, "Oh, in Wing Chun, it's a martial art that was invented by a woman." I mean, he was not a nice guy. It's martial art that was invented by a woman, and they stand in this funny stance like this, and he was making fun of it. And had I, he obviously didn't know much about women and didn't know much about martial arts, but he was a martial arts teacher I'd come across. And when I then came across Wing Chun again, the second time, it was at university, and it was a Wing Chun club, but it was not a good Wing Chun club. And I looked at it and I joined the class, and something was not right about it. So I walked away from it a second time. And then all these years later, when I came across Wing Chun a third time with Sifu Lucas, I understood that this is what Wing Chun really is. And the fact that it was invented by a woman makes it even more special, because it means that it doesn't require aggression, physical strength to overcome an aggressive opponent. And so had I just taken the first thing on face value, I might never have explored Wing Chun. And the same with all the other martial arts.
Definitely understand.
With the karate, I was looking for a kung fu school, but somebody said, check out the karate school. So I checked it out. When I checked it out, I found something that was actually better than I expected.
Awesome. You see how things just turn out, the way how things turn out for the better, I should say. And you go looking for one thing and you find something even better, right? But of course, it takes you a little bit to find out that it's a little bit better than what you were looking at before. Yeah. All right, very good. So, Munawar, I have one last question for you, and it is a doozy. How can you be contacted?
So, you can contact me from deanwaydojo.com. Deanwaydojo.com. DEENWAY dojo.com. Anybody can contact me. There's a form there that you can just send me a message. It'll get to me.
All right. So, anybody wishing to get in contact with Sensei Sifu Munawar Ali Karim, all you have to do is look for the information down below in the description. You'll also find a link for Sifu Munawar's Wing Chun In Depth, available right now on YMAA Publications. Also in the description will be a link for Feiyue shoes. If you need Feiyue shoes, go ahead, click the link down below, get the best prices, get the best deals, all at Feiyue shoes. Munawar Ali Karim, thank you very much for the time that you have taken to speak with me, sir, about your book, about Wing Chun, about all of your experiences in Japan, in England, and all around the world, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. It's my pleasure.